Morning, everybody, and welcome to this hearing panel, which is a subcommittee of the Audit and Governance Committee. No apologies were received, so I'd like to introduce the people who are in the room. I am John Pye. I am chair of the panel today, and I'm independent chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. The three other members of the panel are Councillor Chris Wiggin, Councillor Paul Hodgson-Jones, and Councillor Martin Smart. We have with us the investigator, Alex Ora, the independent person, David Pearl, the monitoring officer, Matthew Cumberbatch, the legal advisor to the panel, Simon Goetcher. Got it. And with us we have the subject member, who is Councillor Anna Bailey. Also present are Rena Rujam, who is the Deputy Monitoring Officer and Head of Legal, and Anne Gardner, who is the Governance Manager. I should remind ourselves that although this is a formal meeting, it is not judicial and evidence is not given under oath. The standard of proof to be met is on the balance of probabilities, as in civil proceedings, and not beyond all reasonable doubt, as in criminal proceedings. Now, before we move into the agenda proper, are there any questions? Councillor Bailey?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, sorry, I have a number of questions, if I may, and I have discussed these with the monitoring officer in advance, and he said this was the appropriate place to bring them, so I hope that's okay. I'm very disappointed that my witness hasn't been able to attend today, so I would very much appreciate an explanation from the chair of the subcommittee about why, when I notified the combined authority about the availability of my witness well in advance of the time of this meeting being set, why was the meeting arranged at the time that I told the CPCA that she wasn't available?
Chair, we went, I think there was a meeting involved in order to set the dates for the hearing to be convenient for everyone, and also an opportunity for you to consider representations on witnesses and so on as part of the process. Obviously, I wasn't involved in that. There's nothing further I can add to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my understanding is obviously availability was canvassed. There were a lot of people's availability that needed to be considered and taken into account. Obviously, Councillor Bailey has had the opportunity to provide evidence through the investigation process and also to submit any written evidence that she wished to be considered. We obviously considered the availability of the witness, but felt that given the other considerations and the timing needed to hold the hearing, and obviously in discussion with you at the pre-hearing process, that the hearing should go ahead on the basis that it was the best day available, and Councillor Bailey could submit any evidence in writing if her witnesses were not able to attend.
Thank you.
Well, it's disappointing. I mean, yes, availability was canvassed, but I wasn't given the time of the meeting, and I had to chase several times to be, whilst I knew the date of the meeting.
Councillor Bailey, I appreciate your disappointment, but could we move on to your next point?
Okay, well, can the chair please help me to understand why my request to move the meeting to this afternoon so that my witness could attend was refused?
You've had an answer from the legal advisor to the panel.
Well, can the chair please explain why he refused my request to make arrangements for my witness such that she didn't have to see or be in the same room as the mayor to give her evidence in the event that his attendance at this meeting, which is obviously his right?
I refer you to my previous answer.
I'm afraid that doesn't answer my question. I requested special arrangements for my witness so that she didn't have to see or be in the same room as the mayor, and that was refused. I'm interested to understand why.
I refer you to my previous answer.
Well, that hasn't answered my question, Chair. I have a further concern in relation to the makeup of the subcommittee today, which two of the witnesses have flagged with me. And I did raise this in advance with officers who advised that I was able to raise it with you today for your consideration. The events which gave rise to my comments that are under examination today are hugely sensitive. They involve 3 females that were working for the CPCA, all of whom have spoken with me individually to discuss the impact of behaviour by key people, all men, at the CPCA on them as individuals. And that includes behaviour most often perpetrated by men against women. The independent investigator is a man, and all 4 members of the subcommittee are men. So I ask you to consider the gender-biased nature of the subcommittee that has been convened today, and whether you agree, particularly thinking about the content of the witness statement, that it should be changed to better reflect both genders and a range of perspectives.
The members of the panel are made up of members of the Audit and Governance Committee and their substitutes. But I don't accept the view that this is bias, but I do note your concern. But we're not going to change the panel and we will proceed.
There are females members of the Audit and Subcommittee, and I think it's a shame that it hasn't been considered, particularly given the sensitivities of this case. So Annex 17 of the Constitution states that the subcommittee will comprise of 3 members, and yet there are 4 members present. Could I have some sort of explanation?
Thank you. The Audit and Governance Committee considered the makeup of the subcommittee at a relatively recent meeting and decided that it should change the provision to being at least 3 members of the committee. And that is reflected in Part 16 of the Constitution. My understanding is that, unfortunately, due to an oversight, that was not updated in Annex 17. However, clearly the decision of the Audit and Subcommittee on the Audit and Governance Committee on the makeup of its subcommittee is the lawful situation, and the fact that the Constitution has not been reflected to update that, whilst unfortunate, does not change the fact that it is at least 3 members. Therefore, this subcommittee is compliant with the decision of the Audit and Governance Committee on what the makeup of this subcommittee should be.
I apologise, I wasn't aware that the amendment that should have been made to the Constitution wasn't done in a timely manner. When we had our first hearing panel last year, in preparation for that, the Audit and Governance Committee considered the number who should be involved and concluded that more than 3 was the right answer, and it does permit an independent chair. And that's why we reached that decision. I wasn't aware that the Constitution hadn't been amended in accordance with that decision, and I'm sorry for that.
Thank you for the explanation. Could the monitoring officer please help me to understand the voting arrangements of the subcommittee when they go into private session? I'd like to understand who actually has a vote and whether it's by simple majority and whether there's a casting vote.
I can answer that. I do not have a vote as an independent member of Audit and Governance. So it's the 3 members who will vote, and there is no casting vote. As there's 3 members, the assumption would be if we need to go to a vote, and we haven't as yet had to, then there would be a majority between 3 people are voting.
So I did ask officers where that was laid down in the Constitution or other documents, and no one had. The answer that I was given is that, in fact, you do have a vote, Chair, and that you exercise your right not to use it.
No, that is not the case. When I was appointed to the Audit and Governance Committee, I have never had a vote in the 8 years I've been chair. And that it's normal that independents do not have votes, because this is a matter for elected members to make these decisions.
Could the monitoring officer give me some advice? Because that is at odds with the email that he sent me.
Which one is that, Councillor?
The email where you said that it is optional for the chair of the subcommittee as to whether he votes or not.
I don't think we should spend any more time on this. I've explained the situation. I do not have a vote. I will not be voting.
I would like to have an explanation as to the rules, if I may, Chair.
I've just explained the rules to you in the sense of I, as chair of the Audit and Governance Committee and of this panel, no independent person has a vote within the Audit and Governance framework.
Can I ask if the independent person that oversaw my case early on has been invited to this meeting and why she's not here?
As I said in my introduction, the independent person is David Pearl, and he's in the room.
Well, I was given a female name, a lady called Gillian, who oversaw my case in the early days. Is it normal to change between independent people?
Yes. It's just something where obviously it's based on availability, and also sometimes there is a preference towards changing an independent person just to show that there's been true independence throughout the process and a changeover of the independent person. So there's no hard and fast rules as far as I'm aware. Obviously, if the chair disagrees with me or the legal advice disagrees with me, that's absolutely fine. But it was not an issue for us in terms of having different independent persons for different parts of the process.
Thank you. Can I ask if any legal advice has already been given to the subcommittee? And if so, I'd like to understand the substance of that advice, as I believe I'm allowed to under Annex 17, paragraph 17, little 5.
No legal advice has been given to the subcommittee. Obviously, there's been a pre-hearing meeting, which I attended with the chair, but not with the other members of the committee, where we discussed your pre-hearing requests and the arrangements for the committee. Albeit I don't think anything that I said in that meeting could really be classified as legal advice. It was more practical discussion about the arrangements for the hearing. And
Thank you very much.
I've not given any legal advice to the subcommittee as a whole before today on this case.
Thank you. And finally, Chair, thank you for your forbearance. I'd just like to ask the subcommittee if they've come here with an open mind, and are you willing to listen to the background and context in which my comments were made, so that you can weigh up the reasonableness or unreasonableness of my comments against the severity of the circumstances?
Does any member wish to comment on that rather interesting question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I have come into this with an open mind. I don't know Councillor Bailey prior to this hearing. I've had no dealings with Councillor Bailey, so I have nothing that clouds my judgment in that sense. So I'm just basing this on the facts presented in the reports and in the meeting today.
That one works. Okay, I'll pretend to be Councillor Smart then. Just to say that I think I understand the question or where it's coming from. My own involvement in this process, I received all my papers. I have no information other than what is in the papers, and I always approach this type of hearing with an open mind. I approach all committee meetings with an open mind, and I think my track record shows my personal integrity to be unimpeachable. Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much for those, because it's always good to get these issues out at the beginning, so we can now move on to the agenda proper. We have no apologies for absence. That was item 1. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest in relation to the proceedings today? No. Okay, item 3 is we go to decide, to determine whether the confidential report may be considered in public. I will now ask Councillor Bailey to whether they wish to ask to exclude the press and the public, whether she wishes to ask to exclude the press and the public from all or any part of the hearing.
So I've put on record in my pre-hearing submission, which I believe has been circulated to members of the subcommittee, that I would like this hearing to be held in open public session. I believe there's a high level of public interest in doing so. There would be a need, in order to protect the anonymity of witnesses, to go into private session for just one part of the hearing. But I do believe most of the hearing can and should be held in public. So no, there is no request from me to go into private session.
Thank you. I will ask the investigator now of their review on this matter.
whilst I note Councillor Bailey's comments, and so in that regard, there's nothing that I want to say that would require the meeting to go into private session.
Thank you. I now ask legal advisor.
Thank you. Obviously, you have to consider the provisions of the Local Government Act 1972, whether there are grounds that would justify an exemption and the exclusion of the press and public. There is information in the documentation in front of you relating to individuals, not just Councillor Bailey and the complainant, but a number of other individuals as well. And obviously, Councillor Bailey has acknowledged that some of that witness evidence should be considered in private. So the exemption in the Act clearly applies, but there is a public interest test which that is subject to. In that is the public interest in maintaining that exemption and therefore hearing the case in private. Does that outweigh the public interest in hearing the case in public? There is quite a significant amount of material in the documentation in front of you which relates to individuals. There's some quite sensitive information in there, and you've also been asked by the subject member to consider part of it in private. In my view, it would be very difficult to hold a hearing, although it's technically possible to go in and out of private session. To do that when you have to consider the totality of the evidence, probe it and discuss it, and the panel members and also other representatives would have to be thinking very carefully at every stage whether there was information that, if they raised it, could potentially put the council in some difficulties and you in some difficulties in unlawfully processing individuals' personal data. I think makes it very difficult for the panel to manage a hearing on that basis. Therefore, in my view, whilst there's clearly a strong interest in transparency, particularly on issues such as these, there will be information published after the hearing, and that will enable there to be that transparency. But I think, given the level of personal data included in the documentation, that the public interest in having the hearing in private and excluding the press and public outweighs the public interest in transparency in this particular case, given the context of the information that you will have to consider.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll ask David Pearl, the independent person, when he has an observation on this. Okay, thank you. to deliberate. Sorry, Alex, go on.
Sorry, Chair. Just a point I think I should make. Although I understand you may have made your decision. I asked the monitoring officer here, whilst there's nothing I intend to say that shouldn't be in the public domain, there are aspects of the report, in particular the annexes, that would need some redaction if we were to move into the public domain. I'm not sure if that can be done at this stage anyway, so that may be a point to bear in mind as well.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've discussed this, and on the grounds of the practicalities of dipping in and out of sensitive information and the need for members to be able to think about coming to the right decision rather than is this open or closed session, we've accepted the advice of the legal advisor, and I'd ask the panel to provide a proposer that we go into closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I propose that we hold our session in private.
And do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair, happy to second.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's decided then that we will.
That's agreed by all the members.
Sorry, is that agreed by all the members? I didn't take the vote. I'm not very good at the voting system. It's a unanimous vote from.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Do you think we could turn that kettle off? Because I'm finding it ever so distracting. I'm struggling to hear a bit.
Okay. Right, I confirm now that the panel is unanimous in the wish to go into private session, and I'd ask Chris to terminate the webcast until